Folks, hello, very good morning to you. I hope you're well. Delighted to have you with me today, this morning, if you're watching live. If you're watching back afterwards from a recording point of view, or indeed if you're listening back to our podcast, you are all very welcome. My name is Rob Magee. I'm the CEO here at Ingenio. And for those of you who don't know us, we have a couple of businesses that are focused on helping people. The first is a recruitment business, and we're very focused there in working with tech, software, and SaaS organizations. So we hire for people right across the spectrum there, and from a European point of view. And the second is an e-learning business called Ingenio Learning, where we have built a course specifically to help people like you get hired by technology, software, and SaaS organizations. I think we're in a pretty good position to be able to help people out in that space. I'm going to kick off. For those of you who are coming back to join us, we're running what I should say is we ran a really interesting series of events, Women Talk Tech, last week to celebrate International Women's Day. And the reason I'm sharing this information with you post-event is that we have posted all 8 interviews live on our YouTube channel. And what I really want to get you to tune into with those videos, I mean, these sessions were absolutely incredible from my perspective. All female leaders in their own right, in their own kind of capability and space. And there are 2 particular questions that I asked each of them. I asked all 8, the same 5 questions. But there are 2 particular questions around getting hired by technology organizations and what are the top tips. And I would really strongly recommend, if you've got some time, to go and have a look at those interviews. Whether you come from an engineering background, whether you come from a services background, whether you come from a sales background, marketing background, there are some absolute gold dust nuggets in there for you, and definitely go and check it out. And that advice is as useful to the males in the audience as well as the females. But I hope that is useful for you. Rolling on to today, you guys are here to talk about, or you're here to listen to me talk about interview questions. So over the course of March, so for the last 2 weeks, for this week and for the next 2 weeks, I'm running a very specialist kind of tuned in focus session, helping people with the interview piece. For the last 2 sessions, we've been talking about prepping. What I want to try and get you thinking and tuning into today is the questions that you are going to be asked, not the questions that you will ask, that's in a couple of weeks' time, but the questions that you are going to be asked, what to expect, how you can prep for them. And I am going to run a poll at the end, and I'm really interested to see what the results come back on, and then we'll really get into maybe live on this on the webinar. We'll get into maybe trying to answer maybe the most difficult one. If you have any questions for me, flick them on, drop them in the Q&A, and I'll respond to them at the end. Okay, so let's get into detail here. I just in terms of interview questions, firstly, what I want to try and get you to do is I want to get you to think back to last week's session. Okay, so if you weren't on last week, I was talking about controlling the interview, and this is basically where you really start to do your prep. This is where you start to nail your prep. What I want you to think about is that there are 4 key sections in the interview, and the questioning is only one of the 4, right? So I want you to remember that without stressing yourself out too much about questions, that is only 1/4 or 25% of the prep that you need to go and do. Okay, so from a context perspective, and just so that you can position things correctly and prep correctly and accordingly, just remember that as a starting point. Okay, And again, for those who know me, you'll know that I talk loads about that questioning needs to be two-way. And as I said to you, we're going to talk about your questions to the interviewer in a couple of weeks' time and getting them really nailed and really succinct. Okay. So let's dig into the detail here. Okay. So the questions that you need to prepare for. So there are probably 10 or 15, maybe 20 questions that are consistently asked, regardless of the type of interview that you are doing. Okay, whether that's a first, a second, or a third, whether that's directly with your hiring manager, whether it's with HR, whether it's with one of your potential peers. There are common, consistent questions that you know are going to come up, right? You know these ones are going to come up, and you need to make sure that you're prepared to answer them. Okay. I've picked out what I believe to be probably the trickier of the common ones, and I'm going to try and talk you through how I would handle and how I would prepare for these ones. Okay. So the first one is, tell me a little about yourself. Okay. And if you think about that as an interview question, typically that happens relatively close to the beginning of the interview, so that the interviewer can get a real kind of decent picture of who you are and your background. Okay. And what I want to say to you in terms of answering this question is, I don't want you to do what most people do in an interview, which is to start way back in university, if indeed that was way back. I want you to start with what you are doing that is relevant to the role right now. And the reason that that's important, in fact, the reason that that's absolutely crucial, is that you will get hired for the experiences that you have had in the last 3, 6, 9, 12 months. You won't get hired potentially for some of the stuff that you did 3 years ago or 10 years ago. Okay. Clearly, all of that experience counts if you have it, but people are typically being hired for what they can bring to the table right now. Okay. So what I want you to do is, I want you to make sure that you have prepared a story about yourself. So this is a storytelling exercise. Answering this question is a storytelling exercise. It should be no more than 3 minutes long. Okay. Anything longer and you will bore the interviewer. Okay. And what I want you to go and do is that this should be an all-encompassing answer to that question. Tell me a little bit about yourself is not just about your work experience. That is about you from a personal perspective. It's about maybe it could be something to do with, maybe where you've grown up. It could be something to do with your family. It could be something to do with the things that you're interested in terms of hobbies and, interests, personal, that type of stuff. Clearly, it is a job interview, so you need to make it relevant and appropriate. But people do buy people, so it's really important that you've got a blend and a balance on that. Okay, so that's the first thing I would say to you in terms of telling me a little bit about yourself. So you start right now and you work backwards. Okay, it needs to be 3 minutes. And what I would really always encourage people to go and do is just make sure that the story that you tell is relevant to the job / company that you're interviewing for. Okay. Clearly, if you are going for a software engineering role and you spend 50% of the time talking about your interest in makeup and beauty products, then that would not be relevant. Okay, so you need to make that relevant. So that's really, really important. Okay, and I want to try and get you to demystify that. I'm going to say this with every single question that you have to prep and answer for, but particularly this one. It's really, really, really important that you record yourself on audio and or video answering that question, because you need to make sure that your facial, your eye contact, your visual, your your ability to deliver key stuff, your ability to smile when you're talking about your personal interests, things that really motivate you. That's really, really important. Okay, so that's the first one. What are your biggest strengths and weaknesses? Let's move on to that one. So I think people get a little bit freaked out about this particular question. And, you know, look, I think there's a fine line in an interview. There's a really fine line between being overtly cocky and obviously being maybe very or too humble, okay? And it's about getting the balance right in between the two. The first thing I will say to you in terms of strengths and weaknesses, okay, is call them out and be honest. That's the very, very first thing that I would go and do. If you don't know what your strengths or weaknesses are, by the way, I mean, look, then clearly you've got to go and do some work. You've got to do some kind of personal introspection, you know, maybe work with a family member or maybe work with a mentor or someone you know from a work perspective, and like ask the question, you know, what are my strengths and weaknesses? That's if you don't know what they are. And there's a really interesting, the whole first section in our course in Ingenio Learning helps you tune in from a personal perspective around some of the career coaching or career counseling kind of fundamentals that we've got in there. And that will help you determine, definitely will help you determine what your strengths and weaknesses are, okay? So the first thing is, to answer that question, you need to know what your strengths and weaknesses are. The second thing I would say to you is call them out, okay? And don't be afraid to be honest, you know? Like, don't be afraid to say that my single biggest strength is my ability to communicate and deal with people, okay? Or don't be afraid to say that my single biggest weakness is, you know, let me say, like, I struggle with achieving timelines. And maybe that's down to university or whatever the case may be. Or in the past, I've struggled with timelines or high intense pressure, whatever the case may be. And the really important piece then, in terms of answering those questions, both strengths and weaknesses, is to be able to say, if the strengths, like, it's to be able to link the strength, absolutely connect the strength to what you're going to do in the role, or what this business is, or what this business is looking for. And how you'll be able to make that connection is obviously researching the job description. And you know, from listening to me, like, I obsess about deconstructing the job description. It's so unbelievably important. And that's one of the ways that you can go and connect there. From a weakness perspective, what I would be doing there is don't be afraid to call out a weakness, okay? Now, clearly a fundamental flaw, weakness, and I've used that example there around maybe, you know, struggling to manage timescales. Clearly, if you said something like that and you were being hired as a collaborative worker, maybe as part of a project management team or something like that, then clearly that would be concerning for an interviewer to hear, okay? But what I want to try and get you to think about from a weakness perspective is to be able to say, look, I know what my weakness is. I have put in place a plan to address it. And really importantly, you might say, you know, Rob, I'm really interested in working with someone like you and your team to help me become a real expert in that area that maybe I'm not so strong in today. And what you can do is almost push the weakness back to your interviewer, so that there's a little bit of collaboration or a little bit of ownership, and potentially a small bit of accountability in terms of them coaching and developing you. Because look, what you've got to remember is everyone has weaknesses. Everyone has weaknesses, and clearly a manager's job is to try and identify what those weaknesses are as soon as they possibly can. And if they can identify them in the interview, then amazing, right? If you're being really open and honest about that. And then it's putting in place a plan to address the areas that maybe you're not as necessarily strong on, okay? So that's what I would say to you about strengths and weaknesses. Don't be afraid to call them out, okay? But you've got to remember what I'm saying about being, as I said, being humble, being not too humble, and not too cocky on either or. Okay, so that's that one. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? So I think this is really important. I think what people really struggle with in this particular question is that they sometimes they haven't actually really understood what the progression route or the track in the role that they're going for is. And so if you think about, I mean, I've mentioned a couple of job titles there, right? So I've spoken about project management, and I've spoken about data analysis. It could be sales, it could be marketing. What I would be trying to do is really try and sketch and map out what happens in a business of the type that you are interviewing for. What happens when someone goes in who's a junior marketeer? Okay, typically, how long do they do the role for? You know, so are they a junior for 1 year, 6 months, 2 years, 3 years, and then they progress into maybe an area of specialization, and then they kind of grow like that. And I think if you have really researched your role, your specialization, and you've really researched, I guess, where you want to go, you know, into the future, I think you'll be able to provide real clarity, like really precise clarity around how you're going to actually be able to go and step through the progressions and the tracks or whatever the case may be. It's really interesting. I had a conversation literally just this morning with a guy who is in an SDR, so a sales development rep role, and he is 18 months in that role, and he's now saying, okay, well, look, I need to start thinking about what my next 5 years look like. And I think really all he's thinking about at the moment is what is literally my next move, without actually considering what my move in a year or 2 years or 3 years might be like. Okay, and whether you're going to be, in his instance, whether you're going to be a sales manager, or whether you want to go down that kind of coaching route or leadership route, or whether you want to be an individual contributor, and whether you want to be solely focused on delivering a target. And again, I'm just using that example. So it's really, really important that you, when you answer that question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? You've got to make it relevant to the role. You've got to make it relevant to how those roles typically progress. And what I would be doing is I would be using a couple of examples of people in that organization who've maybe progressed from, you know, a junior to mid experience to senior to maybe a specialist to a leader, or whatever the case may be. So that's really important. Okay. Why should we hire you? So this for me is a really, really, it's quite a daunting question, but this is really, really simple. And again, I go back to recording yourself here, and I go back to staring down the barrel of the camera and really eyeballing your interview and being able to say with clarity and confidence exactly what it is, exactly what that strength is, or exactly what that kind of unique selling point is, or exactly what is tangible with you in terms of doing the role and making yourself relevant to this organization and to the team. Okay, so it's very, very hard to answer that question without having done a whole heap of the research that we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks, well, in fact, over the last couple of months, and indeed without doing maybe some of the kind of core fundamentals that exist in our Ingenio learning course. Okay, but look, you need to make sure that you are able to answer in no more than 2 sentences. I am the ideal candidate because. Okay, I am the ideal candidate because, which basically is exactly the same way as responding or reacting to why should we hire you. Okay, and we've got a ton of stuff on that, very, very specifically, obviously in the course, as I mentioned. Okay. And then the last one, I think the last one's a really interesting one. Look, if you are unemployed at the moment and you're not in work, this question, by the way, is also very relevant. And again, you need to tune into that one. But it's always very important to be able to answer with a really kind of strong degree of honesty and frankness around why you want to leave an existing role. Now, clearly, if you've got friction between your boss or you know what I mean, or it's something really personal that someone says, oh God, look, I don't want to take this character on because, you know, look, they're highly likely to, you know, infuriate the team, or they're going to be very difficult for me to work with. Clearly, you don't want to be talking about things like that. But there's definitely, you definitely need to address why things are not utopia or perfect where you are. Very definitely, because why would you leave otherwise? Okay. And that could be around progression being blocked or capped. It could be around money. And again, there's no issue with that. It could be around culture. It could be around maybe that you want to broaden your horizons in terms of role, or that you want to be a little bit more niche and precise and specific in terms of what it is that you go and do. It could be something to do, again, I'm talking tech now for a second. It could be something to do with the product, the platform, the service, the software, the tool, whatever the case may be. So again, really start to tune into that. And so that's really, really important. To be able to answer that question with real clarity is very, very, very important indeed. Okay. So I hope that helps. Excuse me. Happy to take some questions on that one at the end. In terms of dealing with difficult questions, right? So I see, certainly our experience from a recruitment perspective is clearly the difficult questions that exist end up being very difficult because either you're not prepared, number one, or they're very difficult because you clearly aren't the subject matter expert in the particular area that these guys need you to be. Okay, so look, that's the very first thing I will say to you. Okay, you've either not prepared or you're not what these guys want. That's typically what makes a question difficult. Gone are the days of the kind of traditional investment bank type questions that are designed to make people really uncomfortable and really you know, put them in a really difficult position so that they can physically see straight away, you know what I mean, that you're not used to, or you're not capable of dealing with kind of stressful positions or situations. We see those types of situations play out more in exercises, and that could be, it could be coding tests if you're dev and engineering, maybe with a time stamp against that. It could be around a presentation if you're in some way customer facing. It could be psychometric questions. I think we spoke about that. Someone asked me a question about that a couple of weeks ago. So I think that's really important. So the first thing I will say to you is, if you're prepared, and there are 4 sections to the interview, as you saw earlier on, there's 4 key sections to the interview. If you are prepared, things become less difficult. Okay, so that's the first thing I'll say to you. So you've got to have an inherent baseline level of confidence in your level of preparation as a starting point, right? If you're not that confident, it's probably because you haven't prepared sufficiently enough, and you need to just get back and spend a bit more time on that. There was an amazing answer, by the way, Keely Mahoney last week in the Women Talk Tech series. I asked Keely, you know, she was talking about interview preparation, and I said to her, like, you know, for people on the call, what's a good kind of time period, you know, to prepare for? Is it what, a couple of hours? And she was like, absolutely not. It's a weekend. Okay, couple of days. So that's a really interesting piece of advice from someone very senior. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I speak about all the time, obviously, when you're doing when you're researching an interview, if you are interviewing for a sales SDR role in an organization, find someone in that business who has successfully got through the interview process for an SDR, and reach out to them and ask them for some help, and see if they can offer you 5 or 10 minutes on the phone or on video or on email, whatever the case may be, and ask them what they've gone through. Okay, Listen, they might not respond. They might not want to give you that insight, but what's the worst that can happen from asking that question? Okay. So always try and find someone who's nailed it ahead of you so that you've got some kind of experience and insight as to what they've gone through. Okay. When a difficult question arrives into you, again, you might not feel like you've got the capacity to be able to do a lot of thinking on your feet, but I think if you're prepared, you absolutely will. What I want to try and always get you thinking about is, what's the motivation for that question, right? So when someone is firing a really tricky or aggressive or pointed question at you, you want to try and figure out on your feet, what is that person trying to get here? Are they trying to get a reaction out of me? Are they trying to see how I respond? Are they based on what they do and who they are and what their role is? Are they looking for something very particular and specific out of it? And again, if you've done your research on that individual, you'll know exactly where they're coming from. So I think that's really, really important, is really try and think about what the motivation is behind that particular question. So that's really important. Okay. I did a session before Christmas with a lady named Mary Lovegrove around kind of mindfulness, and it's really interesting for those people who kind of believe in it, like the ability to stop and pause, even if it is literally for a second or a second and a half or 2 seconds, but the ability to breathe and slow your heart rate down and smile puts you in a significantly better position to be able to answer a really tricky, difficult question. That might sound, really kind of, I don't know, artificial, but believe you me, if you're able to go and react and respond accordingly in an interview and literally just settle your heart rate a little, you'll be in a much better position to be able to recall all of the preparation that you've done, because the likelihood is you have prepared really well, and it's just about getting from the memory bank, it's about pulling the information back out and then presenting in an articulate and calm fashion. Okay. Everyone's interviewing remotely right now on video, and you'll see politicians do this all the time when they're debating. You'll see CEOs do it all the time when they're maybe doing, when they're on Bloomberg, or when they're releasing results, or they're in town hall sessions. Write the question down, and it doesn't necessarily need to be literally verbatim word for word, but maybe some shorthand around what the question is. Again, if you've got something that you can refer back to, and that gives you a little bit of stability in terms of how you go and answer the question, then that's really important. The other thing is that whilst all this kind of stress and anxiety is going on around you answering a question, writing a question down guarantees that you will answer the question that the interviewer asked. And there is nothing that people hate more than asking a question and not getting the answer. Okay. And lastly, clarify that you've answered the question. Okay, so that's really, really important. You might say, Rob, the question you asked me there around, my weaknesses, is that something that, like, have you experienced that, and have you had those experiences with other people in your team? And there you're kind of sharing, you're maybe checking in that you've answered the question, but you're also sharing the problem a little bit. And there's a bit of collaboration there as well. So there's some really important kind of soft psychology stuff in there that I think will really massively help. Okay. So that's it. Standard questions and the difficult questions. Just in terms of wrapping up, guys, or sorry, ramping down, I should say, because I'm going to take a load of questions now, and I've got some time, obviously, to go and do that. We built Ingenio Learning last year to help people like you get hired. We know exactly what it is that technology, software, and SaaS organizations right across Europe look for, and we've built an entire course to help you get hired by these organizations. There's just a quick snapshot in terms of what's included in the course. The stuff that I would get you to tune into is what's on line 3 there, the practicals, the worksheets, and the exercises that make this whole process entirely personalized to you. And clearly you get access to me and the team who are experts in this very particular kind of market segment that we play in. But really, really important, okay? From a pricing perspective, the course normally retails at €100. For anyone who is tuned in today, we have a one-time discount, 65% off, which gives you the course for €35. That promo pricing expires this Friday, and there are spaces available. So again, if you want to get on that course, the guys will drop some details into the chat box and send you something on email afterwards. There's a couple of things in here. You've a full, no quibble 30-day money back guarantee. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that since we've started, we're tracking all of our students. And now, and we've only started talking this in the last couple of weeks, 90% of our students, so 90% of people who take the course, they get hired within 90 days. And that is a serious outcome. I got a fantastic email from a chap who got hired literally on yesterday. Sorry, he got hired yesterday by Bank of America and their team off the back of taking the course. And again, this is the type of stuff that's coming at us all the time. So we're really proud of that. And I think and I hope that the course price is really good value when you tune it into what this actually means to you from an outcome perspective. Okay. I'm going to, we're launching our community. So again, if you want to hear and chat with people who are in exactly the same situation with you, then again, we'd love to get you collaborating with that. I'm going to run a poll really quickly, because what I want to do is I want to see what questions you guys are really struggling with, right? And then I'm going to actually go and work through one of them, right? So just literally give me 5 seconds of your time and answer that question. Which one of these common interview questions stresses you out the most, okay? And based on the answers there, based on the poll results, we'll go and have a crack at that in terms of trying to help you with what that looks like. Next session is next Tuesday at 11, how to sell yourself in an interview. So this is soft, it's psychology, it's reinforcement of message. It's really, really, really important. And again, some hugely useful stuff. So again, get yourself tuned in, into that one. Okay. I'm going to give it another 5 seconds on the poll, but what's looking like the biggest one, thanks for everyone who's voted. What's looking like the biggest one is 33% are saying, why should we hire you? Why should we hire you? And then 24%, 25% are at what are your biggest strengths and weaknesses, and where do you see yourself in 5 years? So look, I'm going to deal with the why we should hire you. So I think the question, as I said this earlier on, the first thing that you need to do is you need to tell a story. Okay, you need to be full of conviction, you need to be clear, and you need to be precise. You need to connect that to the job description. You need to connect that to the hiring manager that is going to hire you, and you need to connect that to the team that you are going to work in. Okay, and that might be something like, I've come top of my class from a data analysis perspective in all of the collaboration exercises that we've worked on over the last 3 years. I feel that I am a really high caliber candidate. I may be lacking some of the experience that you might get from other candidates, but I think I'll be able to drop into this team very quickly. I'll be able to ramp up incredibly quickly. And I think based on all of the research I've done and the engagements I've had so far with you, your team, your HR function, I think that I'm a really strong cultural fit. Okay, so there's a few things there that you will want to really tune into. By the way, you'll get the recording back, so if you want to cut some of the things that I'm kind of responding to. Now, look, I'm doing this literally off the cuff. Clearly, in that situation, I would be making that probably way more precise to the job or to the job description. So a deconstruction of the job description and a deconstruction of your research and prep is really what's required there. Okay. Remember, if you haven't done your prep and you haven't prepared specifically for this interview, it's going to be next to impossible for you to be able to answer that question really, really well. Okay, so I hope that helps. Let me launch into Q&A first, and I will start. I'm going to start in the Q&A. Sergio, is there a right or wrong answer when stating our weaknesses? No, there really isn't. Again, remember what I said there right at the beginning. Clearly, you wouldn't want to expose yourself or present fundamental issues or personality issues or problems to the interviewer. So clearly, excuse me, clearly there's a balance to strike. There's absolutely a balance to strike in terms of obviously presenting or positioning your weaknesses. But if it's related to the role, if it's related to the company, related to the team, I don't think there's any issue in terms of you presenting any of that type of stuff. So there is no right or wrong answer. Okay. Sergio, I hope that helps. Apurva, I'd like to ask Rob, I've had 15 interviews since Jan. I reached last rounds in some of these and was still not able to convert it into an offer, and I wondered why. In fact, in feedback, I've received positive feedback when they said I demonstrated good tech skills as well as communicated clearly. Although I didn't get the offer. I'm not able to figure out what it is that's been going wrong, even after clearing previous rounds. So, Apurva, I think I think you are. It sounds like you're performing well in interview, but it sounds like the feedback that you're getting is probably not precise enough in terms of where you're falling down. Okay. And really what I would be doing, that's about you asking a different type of question to either the interviewer or to HR recruiters. If you're not getting the answer to the question, which is, look, you know, I didn't get the job, no sour grapes, I've got no issues, but I really want to learn. Okay. And there's a reason that you didn't hire me. Okay. Not the reason that you hired someone else, but there's a reason that you didn't hire me. Can you tell me what that reason is? Okay. And it's that level of clarity, like that level of directness that will allow you to get answers to those questions. Now, Apurva, you're not going to be able to do that on an email because no one will respond to you for fear of putting something in writing. So that is lifting the phone and speaking to someone. Again, the hiring manager, the person who's interviewed you, or the recruiter, or the HR individual. Okay, so I hope that helps. Sergio, another question from you. About 5-year question. What do you think of talking about having our own company, for example? Would you think it's risky in the long term of being hired, or would you want to follow your own steps in the future? Absolutely not. Listen, people are not committed anymore to long-term roles and careers. And if it is your dream, your personal ambition to have your own business, then 100% you should be putting that out there. And you will be taking steps along the way to learn from your hiring manager, to learn from your team, to be coached and mentored, to put yourself in that position or situation. So no issues at all. Absolutely no issues at all. Next one, would telling the right weakness lead in not getting selected? For example, a particular skill that is required for a job is a weakness. Look, I think, again, I don't know who asked that question. It's come up as anonymous. What I said to you there at the beginning was, if there is a fundamental skill that is required to do the job and you don't have that, then look, the likelihood is is you're not going to get the job, because clearly that required skill is a mandatory requirement to go and do the job. Okay. If the skill is one of a number of, then I mean, look, that the likelihood is that there will always be concessions made for someone who doesn't necessarily tick all of the boxes. And certainly it's our experience every day in recruitment that there's always a doubt, number one, from an employer's perspective. There's always an inherent doubt around the person that they hire. There's like, they're never going to fully realize or understand, has someone actually, is someone going to be able to do 100% of the job? So look, you need to be careful with it, but you know, again, happy to kind of help on that one. But you know, stuff that is palatable, I think, is really important there. Kripesh, is it okay to say no or skip a question in an interview if we've no idea about the question being asked? Yeah, look, I mean, I think if you reject a question, I think you're fundamentally out. Okay. That is my immediate reaction to that one. It's a great question, by the way, but I think if you say, no, I'm not going to answer that, or I can't answer that, then yeah, you're probably not in the right interview, I think, is probably the immediate one, I would say. Hope that helps. Darren, what should you wear for a Zoom interview? Always dress up. Dress up as much as you need to go. As you need to go. It's funny. I interviewed a candidate. So it wasn't me, the hiring manager, but I interviewed a candidate for a client last week who was wearing a shirt and tie, which I thought was amazing. So he couldn't go any more dressed up. I think probably a shirt and tie in the current climate, I think, is probably a bit too formal, but it depends on the business, Darren, that you're interviewing for. If these guys or girls are wearing, you know, they're very formally dressed and that's how they dress when they're in the office, then you should probably dress up accordingly to show them what you're going to be like when the office returns to normal. But look, for me, smart shirt for a guy. I think for a girl, you know, again, very professional, again, probably shirt, you know, but something that is, again, that is professional, that is, you know, business casual is probably the best way to go and do it. So look, I hope that helps. Again, happy to take a question from you on that. Harriet, good to hear from you. Should a strength be a personality? Should a strength be a personal quality, or should it be solely related to the job specification? Ideally, it'll be both. But you know, look, there are probably lots of strengths, Harriet, that maybe that exist in you inherently as an individual that maybe might not necessarily get related to the job that you do day in, day out, but maybe they can be brought to bear in terms of maybe a particular assignment or a project or whatever the case may be. So yeah, I don't think you've got, I don't think you should disconnect the two, being honest. Helen Cullen, what about ageism in tech? There's a question. Does ageism exist in tech? Look, I think really interestingly now, the move to remote working has really flattened the labour market in lots of different ways. We don't see ageism. I mean, look, you know, we're hiring people of all ages for clients. You know, we're hiring people who are late teens, so almost perceived to be too young, you know, with no experience, late teens, and we're hiring all the way through to, you know, up to the legal age of kind of retirement. I think, Helen, ageism is, you know, it's probably there in tech, maybe on a kind of on an individual basis, but it definitely doesn't exist in kind of businesses in terms of corporate culture. So you might have maybe a hiring manager who might have an ageist kind of strain to their kind of outlook or personality. But look, I think most tech businesses these days, Helen, like if you're good enough to do the job, it doesn't matter what age you are, where you're based, you know, what your background is. where you live. I really think we're a very, very flat industry. So again, that would be my kind of immediate piece. Sonny, is the STAR approach, is it a good approach for PM? 100%. Listen, I think your answer is a closed question, right? Is it a good approach? It absolutely is. And I would continue to kind of use that approach in your methodology. For people who want to check out what Sonny's talking about there, STAR is an acronym around a particular type of approach, which is definitely one of the good ones in terms of having a structure behind you. Johad, do you do interviews for management jobs? Yes, we do. I'm not sure I've answered your question exactly, but we do one-to-one coaching to help people before they're going into jobs. We hire for management jobs. So again, if you want to follow up with me on an email and be a bit more specific, happy to take that one on. Nitish, similar master's degree from 2 different universities, is it a problem? I have been applying for a lot of grad roles. Every one of them is rejected after 2 to 3 rounds. Okay, so it sounds there like, Nitish, you're getting into the interview process and you're then being rejected after 2 to 3 rounds. So you're actually interviewing and you're being rejected on the basis of your interview, not on the basis of your master's degrees from 2 different universities. I think I have yet to hear of a client, I've never heard of a client say, I don't like that girl or guy because they have 2 degrees from the same degree or similar degrees from 2 different universities. I mean, you're overeducated. It just doesn't exist. So I think there's probably something fundamental going on as you're interviewing there. Bavia, I'm changing the industry from tourism sales to SaaS, SDR, lead gen role, but my CV is not getting selected. And if it does, I'm unable to clear it. Yeah, listen, look, the pivot, Bavia, the pivot that you're trying to make right now, obviously is one that lots of people are doing and trying to do. Look, for me, it's really all about your shop window, right? It's about relating and connecting tourism sales into maybe some of the kind of core fundamentals. It could be sales fundamentals, it could be training, it could be the technology and tools that you use, it could be the qualification process. We can definitely help you out there on that. And the course is one way and the one-to-one is the other way that we could definitely help you out in terms of repositioning yourself. Niamh Kearns, do you hire for UX designers? Yes, we do. So we are definitely an agency to do that. If you want to shoot your information and your details through, I'll make sure that Jack or one of the guys in that team basically has a look at that for you. I hope that helps. Okay, I think I just want to check, Alex, I'm not sure if there's any more questions that I haven't covered. Please give some example answers for the questions. Harsha, I think I've probably given you some of that already. There's a good one here, Janathi. How to overcome nervousness in the interviews. So, look, I think probably, you know, it goes back to being prepared, number one, right? I think the second thing is it goes back to practicing with, you know, your family, your flatmate, you know, someone at home, someone that you trust, someone from college. I think that's really important. And I think the second part of your question is there a prototype for non-English native people to follow in their introduction part during the interview? No, absolutely not. Why should there be, or why would there be? You need to nail the overview piece just like anyone else would, whether, you know, you're from Dublin, whether you're from London, whether you're from Singapore, whether you're from Alaska, it doesn't matter. The overview piece is exactly the same. And hopefully I've given you a little bit of structure in terms of how to go and do that earlier on. So I think, guys, I've probably covered all of the questions there. And I hope, sorry, I've got 2 more and I'm going to just take them and then I've got to wrap up because I've got a 12 o'clock. Michael Webb. I have an interview tomorrow and through research I found that they refer to clients as partners. Should I already use this term in my answers? Absolutely, 100%. get into the clothes, wear the shoes of your interviewer, use their language, and start ingraining yourself. Start ingraining yourself within their culture, in their language, in their ethos. I think absolutely 100%, really, really important. You said that you should refer to the answer about the things that you've done in the past year. What do you think about answering the question referring to the part-time jobs that we've done? Is it considered relevant, or do we need to specify the technical experience only related to managerial questions? Look, I have a really interesting candidate that we worked with who is originally from India, who finished a master's here, hasn't been able to get a job, and had been working part-time in Domino's. And the question that he asked was, look, that job in Domino's is completely unrelated to the job that I want to go for, but I need it to support myself. And I said, look, the first thing you need to do is don't ever justify having to support yourself financially to anyone, right? Everyone needs to pay the rent and eat and you know, pay bills and everything else like that. And sometimes people are a bit curious, you know what I mean? They want to know what you're doing to support yourself. They want to know that that maybe there's motivation, that you'll do whatever it takes to go and get the job done. So, like, yeah, I do think to that question, I do think that there's no harm in talking about it. Maybe you know, if you're asked the question, then you'll be really direct, or maybe in your personal overview piece, maybe it's in there. Okay. And last one, Nitish, I'm still doing my MSc project management in UL. I'd like to take the course at the end of my master's. Is there any possibility? Of course there is. We'd love to have you. So just give us a shout when you're ready to take it, Nitish. Guys, I hope that is really useful to the many people who stayed on to listen to those questions and kind of feel part of the community. I hope that is really useful. Delighted to have you with us. See you next week. And as I always say at the end of this stuff, the market at the moment in this space is absolutely hopping. It's bouncing. It's really positive and really strong. Okay. You need to be, as a candidate, you need to be exceptional. And we're here to help you. The course is here to help you. And these webinars are here to help you be exceptional. So keep the faith. Look after yourselves. See you all next week. Take care.